I think oftentimes when people hear me and see me, they think that I'm a fool. They think that somehow or another I've lost my mind, that I'm not down with the in crowd. They've said that nobody would love me and that I'm an outcast. But let me say this here now. We can be clear about anything. Please let me be clear about this. And I pray that it's received and understood. I don't want to be one of you. I don't want to be one of you weak men, weak people.
For my brother,
I'd rather die. Death is welcome rather than to call myself you spineless black men.
Sahara, I ain't your traditional. Rapper smoking medicinal, stayed in detention. Life is all about principles, cynical ass niggas. Sorry that I offended you. I bring something different while niggas sounding identical. I'd rather drown in a swimming pool than to let you imbecile stop me from topping my pinnacle. Try me blocked by the genitals. Trust me, it's not intentional. It's the difference between a gangster and a criminal. Cause real gangsters can't do Breakfast Club interviews. A lot of you niggas don't own a business suit. A slave for every pair of Michael Jordan tennis shoe. But anywho, got your bitch walking around like she winning pool with no bottoms on, just the top of her swimming suit. What you gon' say when the niggas gon' try to get at you? Them in what army, or you just talking in general? Cause in the end, we all gon' die like them Seminoles, nigga. These niggas weak. I'm fucking up, these niggas weak. These niggas weak. I'm fucking up, these niggas weak.
When I look at the sorry state of black men in America today, the destruction of the family, the loss of integrity. When as a young boy, black shot down every day for years without stopping, when I look at what we are as black people, I'd rather be dead than to continue to live against such.
Y'all ain't trying to start a revolution. Y'all looking for a restitution. Niggas kill each other every day and ain't no evolution. My partner shot 100 niggas and it was never proven. We just labeled him a gangster and kept it moving. Let me give you the same outcome, separate shooting. A white man kill a black, we holler persecution. So instead of looting, it's time to find some better schooling. You can act like y'all don't understand when I'm elocuting. Did I stutter? I was never Ruben. Y'all ain't no Black Panthers. You wasn't there with Newton. You ain't Marshall Martin. Try to better humans. Instead of all these rappers, we need some better students. It's time to rebuild the neighborhoods that we helped to ruin, and the NAACP, y'all need some help recruiting. Fuck a resolution, let's get some retribution. I feel like Malcolm X when he left the movement. These niggas weak. I'm fucking up, these niggas weak. These niggas weak. I'm fucking up, these niggas weak. Yeah. Y'all know what it is, yeah, I said it, nigga. All you niggas laying up with these bitches with no condoms and shit. Having mistake babies and shit, leaving these women to motherfucking raise your kids by their motherfucking self. Yeah, my nigga, I said it. You don't like what's going on in the motherfucking America, leave this motherfucker. When they said we were free, my nigga, that mean we were free to go back where the fuck we came from, my nigga. Yeah, it's a whole motherfucking continent that belong to us, nigga. It's called Africa, motherfucker. What the fuck is y'all talking about? Y'all ain't trying to start no revolution. Y'all motherfuckers spent 10 bands on the motherfucking section in the motherfucking club. 10 bands to build a whole motherfucking neighborhood in Nigeria, nigga. Get the fuck out of here.
Talk to these niggas, man. What up? Peace to the fam. Make sure y'all please like the show, share the show. I'm going to go into it real quick, and I'm going to get on out of here. All right. So today, let me share my screen real quick. I'm going to get right into it because I got some other stuff to do. But peace, fam, man. How y'all doing? We're going to get back to West Africa. Because these other folks ain't trying to start no revolution. You heard me? There we go. All right, so that's what we're gonna be dealing with: the forgotten city of Jenne-Jeno. You don't know about Jenne, you don't know about Jenne-Jeno, and we'll get into it. Um, when West Africa is mentioned, one usually thinks of Ghana, the Empire of Ouagadougou, the Empire of Mali, or the Empire of Songhai, right? Or places like Timbuktu, Goree Island, sometimes even Elmina, or even Jenne. Some people do know about Jenne. Um, for the architectural uh, greatness that comes out of Jenne, especially with like the Mosque of Jenne. I'm not promoting Islam, but the architecture is West African, definitely. Um, most have no clue about one of, if not the most abundant in ancient archaeological excuse me, but abundant in ancient archaeological site in West Africa, that being the site of ancient Jenne. So we know what Jenne is today, located in Mali, present day Mali. But there's ancient Jenne that we'll get to later. Um, there is some of the artwork coming out of this ancient Jenne that we'll be discussing. We'll get back to the artwork and the pottery and all that stuff later, right? So this kind of lays out what we're gonna be talking about. So I just took the page instead of even taking the time to write this on the slide. So from the 16th century until the late 19th century, when French colonial mercantile interests altered century-old trade patterns in the inland Niger Delta, the city of Jenne dominated the central delta as a major commercial center, linked to Timbuktu by 500 kilometers of navigable riverway. Jenne was a major entrepot in the long-distance trade networks along which passed major commodities like gold, salt, copper, slaves, cola, and a host of minor commodities. So historical sources permit a great deal of certainty about the preceding two statements. For one, or excuse me, for periods earlier than the 15th century, however, Jenne retreats into historical obscurity. So anytime before the 15th century, they don't really have too much on that in reference to Jenne. The failure of any Arab or European sources prior to the mid 15th century to mention the town by name has convinced various historians of the Western Sudan that Jenne did not exist substantially prior to this time. And I cut that off right there for a reason. Peace. Peace, Brother Lion. Peace from West Africa. Peace, Brother Kofi. Everything is everything. I'll see y'all in here. Earliest details of the Western Sudan are provided by Arab geographers and historians, none of whom mention Jenne by name. So these Arab sources that we have do not mention Jenne by name. They rarely mention Jenne, but when they do, they don't mention them by name. The transfer of commercial control from Arab to or Berber hands into black hands in the southern Sahara is reflected in Arab sources by the decline of the amount and precision of detail given for trade routes and commercial centers south of the Sahara. So they didn't really like to talk about the black uh cities and trading centers and entrepôts that were quote unquote pagan. The southern frontier of the Arab knowledge seems to be the Senegal and Niger rivers, which Arabs believe to be but one river, the Nile. South of the river, Arabs knew only that a pagan tribe of blacks, the Lam lived. Beyond the Lam lay uninhabited territory. So beyond where their influence stopped, they didn't know nothing about it. They ain't care to know nothing about it. All they know was some quote unquote pagan of blacks, quote unquote pagan tribe of blacks, the Lam lived, and past that is no man's land to them. It is difficult to know how much of the vague reportage of the sub-Saharan Western Sudan by Arabs stem from a genuine place or confusion, and how much is a function of selective reporting. It is possible that the towns of Black Africa held little fascination for cosmopolitan Arab scholars, many of whom wrote for royal patrons who possessed black slaves. So why would they look at these people as slaves? Like, why I want to care? Well, I mean, why would I care what they cities got going on, what they trade centers, and what they spots looking like? I ain't writing on that. Fuck out of here. Unlike most Mandate speaking parts of West Africa, Jenne-Jeno Jenne-Jeno's oral tradition is fragmentary in the sense of verbally, and this is not supposed to be Jenne-Jeno, this is supposed to be Jenne itself, the modern Jenne. Um, in the sense of verbally related and retained chronologies of events passed down from one generation to another, like those recited by the Bambara griots. Like, so they don't have that, like that oral transmission that we see common in West Africa. That's not in Jenne like that. It's not quite the same. There is no griots and no known unified pre-Islamic oral history. This is understandable due to the multi-ethnic and polyglot diversity of a place where each group retained their cultural and historical identity. So within this Jenne, if I'm correct, there were 6 different ethnic groups that lived in harmony, and they retained their own culture, they retained their own histories and oral traditions. Jenne-Jeno was an egalitarian society, being that no one group dominated or became the guardians of history. Another thing that compromised the integrity of earlier oral traditions was the growing influence. It's a typo. The growing influence of Islam and literacy in Jenne. Ulama is Islamic scholars such as Al-Sadi, who is the one of the authors for the Tariq al-Sudan, translated some oral traditions into Arabic, but the pagan quote unquote past is always discounted. So Al-Sadi, one of the authors of the Tariq al-Sudan, he translated some of this oral tradition of Jenne, but he kind of dismissed the parts or the areas that weren't Islamicized. As literacy in Islam spread, oral transmission of tradition may have diminished in importance and frequency. The bulk of what's known of Jenne's oral tradition comes from 3 main sources, and that would be the Tariq al-Sudan and Monographie de Jenne and Haout, Senegal, Niger. I didn't write the authors of these. Y'all can go look them up yourself. I think I actually do mention this author, Tariq al-Sudan. I mentioned him earlier. That's Mahmoud al-Saidi. All accounts agree that 8th century CE origin for Jenne is in place, the modern Jenne. The Tariq al-Sudan provides the following account of Jenne. In the beginning, The town had been built in a place called Zoboro. Remember Zoboro? Later, it was moved to the spot where it still exists today. So he said in the beginning, the town had been built at a place called Zoboro, and then they moved it to where it's at today. The former town is situated near the modern town in the southern direction. The town was founded by pagans in the mid second century AH, which would be after the Hijra, which would be about 800 AD, right? Coinciding with that date that we talked about earlier. The inhabitants did not convert to Islam until towards the 6th century AH, or after the Hijra. The Zaboro site is still well known to the inhabitants of Jenne. That was the end of the quote, by the way. The Zaboro site is still well known to the inhabitants of Jenne today, which is about 3 kilometers southwest or southeast, excuse me, of Jenne, and is also known as Jenne-Jeno. So Zoboro is Jenne-Jeno. Zoboro was originally a Bozo settlement. So I'm pretty sure we have talked about the Bozo before. There was a conflict over which city was the foundation, Jenne or Jenne-Jeno. Montiel, remember I told you that I was going to tell you about the author of one of those three sources. This is one of the authors. He believes that the 8th century date refers to Zoboro, which would be Jenne-Jeno. And Trimmingham accepts this date for Jenne, which would be the modern Jenne. Oral traditions collected by Montiel and Della Fosse add insight. Zoboro was a Bozo settlement originally. According to the tradition, Songhai-speaking Marca people entered the upper inland Niger Delta from the southwest and superimposed themselves on the Bozo natives. The name Jenne is thought to be a derivative of the Marca word Jana, meaning little deer. And I'll leave it to y'all to dig into a little more. But that was an earlier settlement. We'll talk about the settlement date for Jenne-Jeno in just a minute, but just know that Dia was even earlier than Jenne-Jeno. Levetzian disagrees with both dates of circa 800 for Jenne and circa 1200 for the conversion of Islam, and regards them as way too early. Say they too early. He argues Jenne owes existence to Timbuktu and increasingly slow prosperity until it became prominent in the 15th century. So Levetzian was saying that Jenne and Timbuktu was popping at the same time, and they kind of got popping. Jenne was kind of popping because it was so close in proximity to Timbuktu, which was popping. So how they gonna try to give Timbuktu all the shine, right? And Timbuktu was a settlement that dates back to circa 1100. So that's 12th century. He suggests that Jenne and Timbuktu developed simultaneously, which coincides with Della Fosse's date of circa 1250 for Jenne's founding. Ultimately, excavations in the 1970s, 1977, starting out to be specific, give real answers to these conflicts. Jenne-Jeno is the origin. Jenne-Jeno is the original Jenne. So Jenne-Jeno is the birthplace. It was originally called Jeno. What we call in Jenne-Jeno today, it was originally just Jeno. But you'll find out later, after the decline of the settlement, it was a movement, a shift about 2 miles, and that's where the modern Jenne will be today. So it literally translates, Jenne-Jeno literally translates to ancient Jenne. Ancient as in before the Common Era. This site is about 2 miles from the modern Jenne and is located on the valley of the Niger. Jenne-Jeno was first settled and inhabited by the Bozo people, who are a Mande group that are located primarily in Mali along the Niger River. Right? And you see the Bozo people in these two images that I have on the right. You're not seeing that, sister, before. The occupation of Jenne-Jeno is recorded archaeologically in phases, and it's 3 phases. Right? There's some more little artwork for you. Let's see what homie talking about. Matter of fact, let me first mute my mic and then play the disclaimer, because I don't trust YouTube for nothing. You know what I'm talking about? Let's see what homie talking about, though. Okay, matter of fact, hold on, let me unshare. No, I'm good. Y'all should hear this, but if you don't, then let me know. I'm gonna be watching the chat.
For centuries, Jenne-Jeno lay ignored, its history and significance completely unknown. But just 33 years ago, a team of archaeologists realized that this unassuming mound was in fact made up of debris 5 meters deep. It revealed evidence of an ancient city 1,000 years older than Benin. Jenne-Jeno was first settled around 200 BC and was inhabited until the 14th century. It's thought that the arrival of Islam may have contributed to the demise of the animist settlement.
Here, as an animist place, there was no room for the people to pray, because the Islam recommend to pray by group. So there wasn't a room for all the religious to pray. So then the king decided to build in the 12th century the first mosque. He make his biggest. People are curious to see that's big building, that's big mosque. And so then since this guy decided to build this mosque, so then start the decline of Jenne-Jeno.
But the fact that animist beliefs were practiced in such an ancient city is important. It means that spirits like those in the Mason's bricks have been a profound part of West Africans' lives for many centuries. But Jenne-Jeno's significance is not just metaphysical. Artifacts found here have convinced archaeologists that Jenne-Jeno was the region's first major trading crossroads, possibly from the time of its settlement around 200 BC. Evidence of craftsmanship is scattered everywhere, and it's a technology with a distant link to the manufacture of the Benin bronzes, pottery.
Can you tell me, from these shards of pot, what periods are represented here? I mean, if you pick up, there seems to be pottery of so many different types, so many different kinds of decoration.
850 until the 11th century. From the 850 until the 11th century, people had used this technique.
À partir de 1100, on est jusqu'à l'abandon de Jenne-Jeno, 14e siècle. Voilà, jusqu'au 14e.
So when this city was being abandoned, these were the kinds of pots that they were making.
In the 14th century, it was completely abandoned.
So this is Jenne-Jeno at its height, when people are demanding, I imagine, sophisticated pottery.
Exactly.
They're probably trading with people from right across the region. And obviously then the pottery reflects all of that economic might.
Jenne-Jeno wasn't just making pottery required for the casting technology of Benin.
Oh, this is metal.
Piece of metal, yeah. So that is from the 800 after Jesus Christ.
That's iron.
Iron, yeah.
Smelted iron.
The excavations have revealed evidence of blacksmithing here. The iron industry of Jenne-Jeno is one of the earliest known in sub-Saharan Africa. And the continuity of remains makes archaeologists believe that there was a guild system here, just like the masons of Jenne and the bronze casters of Benin. This early evidence of metalworking and a guild system means that the craftsmanship seen in the Benin bronzes developed in West Africa over many centuries. But there are no iron ore mines near Jenne-Jeno, and whilst there were animist practices here, I still haven't found evidence of the symbolism seen in the Benin craftsmanship.
Yo, I should have put that later. Huh? You spilled all the beans. Yeah, my boy though, he said 800 the year after Jesus Christ. He ain't playing no games over there. All right, so look, this phase 1. Remember I said they got 3 phases. Phase 1, or the early phase, it would be from circa 250 BC, before the year Jesus Christ, to about 50 AD, after the year Jesus Christ. You know what I'm saying? Jenne-Jeno occupation covers the settlement of the site by immigrant bozo iron-using people and its subsequent raid expansion to a size of at least about 25 hectares. I don't know what that is, but you know, we got Google. By the end of the phase, it was at 25 hectares. This is some of the earliest evidence for iron producing in the sub-Saharan African area, right? Before 250 BCE, the area was a marsh swamp that is thought to be uninhabited and only visited briefly by nomadic groups until a dry spell around the time of permanent settlement. Archaeological surveys of this time during the phase 1 site has uncovered mostly cows. So they had a lot of cows, but also Nile perch. I bet that Nile perch tastes fine. And catfish from the local fauna, leading scholars to believe that phase 1 group were hunter-gatherers or pastoralists. These immigrants were widely believed to be from an earlier site of Dia. Remember I said that earlier. In Mali, they call Jenne-Jeno Lil Dia. So that's like saying Little Mexico. You know what I'm saying? They came and took over. And that is the marker people, right? But the oldest pottery of Jenne-Jeno, tracing back to 250 BCE, shows identical affinities to Saharan ceramics. So we got pottery, archaeological evidence of pottery in West Africa, 250 BCE. And like I said, Dia, the site that they're talking about right here, is earlier than Jenne-Jeno, if I'm correct. So phase 2, excavation sites at Jenne-Jeno at phase 2, which will be 50 CE, after the year Jesus Christ, to about 400 CE, after the year Jesus Christ. So that phase 2 strata recover a substantial sample of well-preserved shaft of whatever that is. African rice, right? So that's the proper term for African rice, quote unquote. This is the earliest known evidence of African rice production. Phase 2, so they weren't producing it in phase 1. So, or at least there is no evidence for that. Let me say that. Phase 2 is also characterized by economic and faunal continuity with phase 1. So the fauna, the economic system from phase 1 stayed the same. The expansion of deposits and excavation sites of phase 2 suggests great population growth. This is thought to be mainly due to permanent mud brick architecture and domestication and cultivation of rice. Right, so that's that African rice we talked about. And let's get to this one real quick. This is one I got on Niger Valley Civilization. It's dealing with the modern Jenne, but I thought it was dope. I thought it was interesting, so I threw it in here somewhere. Let me play the disclaimer real quick. YouTube don't play no games. YouTube don't play no games. You see, this is educational.
Ima ni yinyesi kogoma ni basa ina to abi kogomine sababu mun ya to atibi kan ne ba darbi yele no kan wo kan min ba dala amma son mun fana wo kan ne ba ndala wo security wo kuma na an tafi basa kabi anyana ni yi maso ni basa bini yana hami yare yi ka jore yare.
Archaeological finds suggest that the human settlement of Jenne began over 2,000 years ago. Positioned on trade routes that crisscrossed West Africa, Jenne became a thriving urban centre.
Bozo de Jenne, donc fenti se ka ke bozo ko Jenne. Se on fait ba korolen ko ni bina ke ini bozo de ba fo.
Mamna dugu ba fe kasigi. Jina ko dugu tasiga fu ka mogodi. Sarakai ambe muso wudi kere sarakai wudi kere jena poyi a jole ko jora la ale ko sara abal ma kenna na yin kalke ko yar a to ko sudu ko abe ko wala ale fana bora kabi ko tana po we anyi.
In 1988, Jenne was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its historical importance and unique mud brick architecture. The town's one mosque has become a world-renowned architectural icon.
Bon, ni bidondu kono depuis ma kilomètre joli, inyeba ale de yangani na sanfɛ dugu kuna. Bon, inyebe élément minnu na ni srafal ni bɛɛ baara de kɛ. Masiri de don mais bɛ baara de kɛ. Kele yiri minnu filɛ la, masiriw de don. Mais ni muni bɛ kɛ san, mɔgɔw bi yɛlɛ nin de kan pour ka se ka
The building tradition is perpetuated by the town's masons. Each year, the masons and townspeople replaster the mosque with mud. This is Jenne's greatest celebration.
Ni misrimuni na kuma duguni nu jera ka abaroke ka fo misrimuni awati sera na sudara wala kamaleum donc ulube bokonyum kana. Nunanaye udugu sagaye mugutigiu musobara emi munini na ubita jideta kananaye
mama sande umena basoro chokorbo sigilembe ku makono itegate maga misiri na fo uka ordu dima.
In 2009, the Aga Khan Foundation began a major restoration of the Jenne Mosque.
Ubina wati ni misiri mogo tumedilana parce que yoro chama kumala min commencer kan nobo konona na mogo tado tel que sebe minu ba kono minu kema ka bi chama tuntulla.
In order to strengthen the structure, the layers of mud accumulated over the past century were stripped from the building.
Ima follow ni ta Jenne misiri ka bu inye korokosebe sisa misiri misera. Nti bo chama kontu mesoenka we abe koni ji ka bwaka onyono bo bi se ka dun ka fere mo onye kor ka kinye akumbi chugwe na ka blaw chugwe la Young in Kamba for Kuya Baraka come to a Wuka Barakichu. A Bram Frasunka Barakula.
During the 3-year restoration, the replastering ritual was suspended. This was a source of great anxiety among the townspeople.
An ye yɔrɔ dɔw mu, an ye yɔrɔ dɔw to yen quoi. An kɔni fɛ k'o ye min ye san o san an ka mun o de ka d'an ye kɔni. A ka kan y'an dɛmɛ a diyara an ye kɔni. Mais dugu landa ye min ye parce que fête de don ɲɛnɛkɛba de don misiri mun ni quoi. Dɔw kun bɛ bɔ fo yɔrɔ dɔw la jɛnɛkaden u bɛ na baara nin kama.
Silamɛ kɔnɔ o kama a dɔw mana se bɛɛ bɛ ɲɔgɔn kunbɛn cɛ ani muso danfara ka bɔ ɲɔgɔn na fewu i y'a faamu wa o de y'a bonyayɔrɔ ye i y'a faamu wa n'a kɛra i kɔ dɔrɔn a bɛ komi hɛrɛba de y'i jɛ ni mun kɛra n'a banna kan an bɛ sɔrɔ ka ala ka fɛn wɛrɛ yira an na an b'o fɔ ɲɔgɔn ye o ye fɛnba de y'an bolo parce que an bɛ ɲɔgɔn kunbɛn misiri la mais an ɲɛ bɛ da ɲɔgɔn kan a b'an tin don ɲɔgɔn na i y'a faamu a ko ka bon bɛɛ de ma cɛ ani muso jɛnɛ misiri kɔni tɛ fɛn dɔgɔma y'an bolo a bɛ komi sanu.
Yeah, so what I do, I ain't think about that until just now. Them little ass subtitles. I'll try to add the video to the description with the rest of the sources. Oh yeah, the sources in the description. I'm following Sean Lee, but I will also have them at the end of the presentation as well. But I'll try to add it to the description. But the video is on Niger Valley Civilization. It's called the Masons of Jenne. But yeah, it's all right. It's saying everything they saying is everything I'm presenting anyway. So we cool. All right, say it next, motherfucker. There we go. So we have phase 3. Phase 3, 400 CE to 900 CE. And excavations of phase 3 till even more mass population growth due to overpopulated cemeteries. That's what they found in the phase 3 strata. Digs also uncover wall stumps, which are associated with fairly deep deposits, suggesting that occupation of a house could span an appreciable time span, perhaps several centuries. So the way they build these houses, it was made to last generations, and made for generations, multiple. This phase expanded Jenne-Jeno to roughly 41 hectares, or about 101 acres. So this expansion, which culminates in the construction of a city wall being built about 2 kilometers long or 2 kilometers long or whatever, bro. I ain't even hold you. I'm not astute with these European or these UK measurements or wherever they come from. But yeah, you get it. It's associated with the appearance of copper, and by 400 AD, after the year of Jesus Christ, and gold about 800 AD, after the year of the homeboy at Jenne-Jeno, suggesting the settlement's participation in long distance trade. So they finding evidence that suggests long distance trade, right? Pre-Islam, right? The pottery of this period includes distinctive polychrome painted pottery and deep red burnished wares with white geometric painted designs. Around 1000 CE, after the homeboy. However, both Kianana and Hambo, that's what it's gonna be called today, are abandoned, and Jenne-Jeno being a period. Jenne-Jeno begins a period of decline that similarly ends in abandonment around 1200 AD after the homeboy. This decline corresponds with the first evidence at the site of contact with Islamic North Africa. Ain't that a bit? So the ultimate decline of Jenne-Jeno coincides with the first evidence that we see of contact with Islamic North Africa, which would be beads, spindle whorls, the introduction of rectangular house plans. So some fishy going now, right? Why would the city decline when Islam came around? That's weird. Let's play this is the last video. I shouldn't have put all these videos in here. All right. Let me mute my mic.
We're in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in their African galleries, looking at this extraordinary terracotta figure.
We have a seated figure who's pulling one knee up and wraps his upper body around that knee, turning his head in this uncomfortable way to the side on his knee.
And the way that the clay was shaped creates this snake-like quality that allows the body to turn and move in a way that seems to defy any kind of internal skeletal structure.
I think that this object could represent somebody who is ill. When I first started studying these objects, I was very drawn to, frankly, how weird they are.
And expressive.
There's something fantastical about them. What I saw is very highly imaginative. But the longer that I've studied them, the more questions I've developed around what exactly is being represented here.
We should say at the outset that we know very little about these figures. This is one of approximately 1,000 objects that have been found. Most have been looted, and so we have very little firm archaeological context for these objects.
They are a perplexing group of objects. We have a very wide date range for them because we have very few objects that were found in context. But they pose a tough question to us because lacking context, we can never really fully understand how they were used. However, they constitute an incredible resource for us because they're one of the few large corpuses we have of objects before the colonial period. So they absolutely demand study.
If these are figures with a kind of affliction, if this is an expression of pain or perhaps sorrow, it stands in such contrast to so much sculpture where the ideal figure is represented.
And even within this corpus of 1,000 objects, there are objects that are very strong. There are horse and riders, for example, the paragon of strength during this period of the trans-Saharan trade.
And by trans-Saharan trade, you're talking about kingdoms that developed trade networks that crossed the desert, that moved from sub-Saharan Africa through to the Mediterranean coast.
We think that these figures emerged in the context of the collapse of the first major empire, the Empire of Ghana. We know that there was a big population movement into the inland Niger Delta, and that there was a lot of population pressure around this period when these objects seem to emerge in the historical record. The next empire to emerge is the Empire of Mali, and the founder of that empire, Sundiata Keita, is born lame and has to learn to walk and overcome this in order to become this powerful leader who unites the Kingdom of Mali.
This is such a complicated moment because you have the introduction of Islam, you have older traditional religions, you have the building and collapsing of empires.
And you also have an incredible movement of goods and people. You have traders coming down to Timbuktu. You have another group of traders coming up to the city of Jenne. And you have the Niger River, which is the super highway of the trans-Saharan trade. I would argue it's also a disease vector.
And so these could be representations of disease, either those that have contracted disease or perhaps those that are trying to ward it off. In this particular sculpture, we have the most elaborate back. We see these forms that stand off the back that almost look like soft buttons. Mm-hmm. And we also see these circles that have been incised in rows in between the button forms. And it's also regular and decorative, that they could be pustules, perhaps a kind of abstract representation of a pustule or of a bubo, of a blister of some sort. But they also could be some kind of scarification. They could be deliberate.
Are we seeing a number of symptoms loaded onto a figure, that kind of representation of illness in a big sense? Is this a depiction of various particular symptoms of a particular illness? And could this kind of stylization on the back, could that be a kind of response, an attempt to ward off illness? It's almost impossible to know, but people who overcome illness, we can imagine, might also be seen as very spiritually powerful.
If we look at the torso, there is this flaring from the narrowness of the neck into this very large belly and very strong legs.
I think other scholars might even argue that they don't see illness here and that they just see a very expressive and very creative representation of the human body. But I would go back to the point that you're making about looking at the body swelling and the way that the torso swells, and we move down into these very substantial thighs. But as you move down the rest of the leg, you really see a kind of shrinking in the calf and then these very tiny feet. This is the value of having put together a very large corpus. We have a lot of comparative material, and I frequently see this kind of shriveled lower limb, and even have seen it to the point of great elasticity where the limb becomes very plastic and is even thrown over the shoulders, which to me looks like something very much akin to polio. Again, raising the question, are we seeing a representation of arrival of particular diseases that may have come through the trans-Saharan trade?
The fact that we have so few find spots, that we have so little archaeological evidence to go with these figures, makes interpretation difficult in and of itself. So there's a real conundrum. When these figures were first discovered, they were being excavated using scientific archaeological methods, but very soon looters took over, and the vast majority of objects in museums today are coming from looted sites, which means we don't have a find spot and we don't have archaeological evidence. There's another layer, though, which is that in order to reduce further looting, there's been a kind of a moratorium on scholarship about these objects to help reduce their attractiveness to the market and to private collectors.
It's an understandable position, and as you say rightly, it's a conundrum. However, the objects that are out, and I would argue that we must find a way to make these objects speak. We have to ask them different kinds of questions than the kinds of questions we would ask if they were in an archaeological context.
We can't pretend that they don't exist.
Yeah, so yeah, that was interesting how they were trying to prescribe something to these artistic styles. I mean, how about talking to the people in the area? Did you think to do that? God damn, man. I don't think it want me to leave this slide. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Talk to the people. All right, trade. I think this the last subtopic that we deal with, and then we done. So excavation suggests the local and regional trade in the inland delta and adjacent areas was a factor in Jenne-Jeno's early expansion. And in an alluvial plain lacking iron ore and stone, at the interface of two major vegetation zones, which would be the savanna and the Sahel, the dry savanna and the Sahel, makes it the perfect candidate for early growth of interregional exchange. Phase 1 deposits strongly suggest trade involvement. Not only are stone beads from the earliest deposits foreign to the inland Niger Delta, but also evidence of iron that must have been obtained from outside of the Delta, presumably by trade. I mean, unless somebody got a better idea of how it got there. There is no known sources of iron ore in the inland delta suitable for smelting. The survey suggests that iron ore or bloomery iron with slag still adhering was imported into central delta as backed by some 19th century sources. So there was no places suitable in the inland Niger Delta for the smelting of iron, so had to come from outside, right? That iron ore and all that had to come from outside, so it had to be some type of trade, and that's where they're hanging the evidence for trade in these early phases of Jenne-Jeno. So pre-Islam, we have not only pre-Islam, pre-Christianity, that before the homeboy came through. Before the homeboy JC came through, 250 or roughly 250 years before the homeboy JC came through, we had a West African settlement that was doing trade, interregional and long distance. Pre-Islam, they were doing trade, interregional and long distance. They had egalitarian societies. They had the cultivation of rice. So let me add something to that pre JC, pre your boy Muhammad, pre Timbuktu. Timbuktu is roughly 1100 AD, after the homie JC. We all rant and rave about Timbuktu. Yeah, this is it. So this is my sources, which will be in the description as well. So we all rant and rave about Timbuktu, Ghana, the Empire, Ouagadougou, Mali, Songhai. Understandable. That was us. That was our shit. Timbuktu, not so much, but we rant and rave about it. Heavily Islamically influenced. I don't know if Islamically is a word tonight. Heavily Islamically influenced. Berbers, Arabs, they got control of that. They all up and through there. I ain't saying that we wasn't, but the control of the city, who ran shit, who founded it. It was founded by Tuaregs. Them ain't us. But we rant and rave about Timbuktu. Now, when you hear somebody talking about great West African history, great West African settlements, great West African places, trade hubs, etc., great ancient West Africa. Now you got something to add to the conversation. You have Jenne-Jeno, 250 BCE. It was popping way before Timbuktu. You also have places like Walata and all that. Like we got too many spots in West Africa to be harping on Timbuktu. I hate that. I always hated that. So now we got that. We getting back to West Africa, which, you know, with the Dogon situation and what all that was right there, that kept us in West Africa. So that was cool. But we getting away from the foolishness and getting back to the information. We getting back to the building. We getting back to genuine topics without all the foolery. So Jenne-Jeno, 250 BCE, the Bozo people, the Marker people. It was popping before Islam. It was popping before Christianity in Timbuktu. They had trade, interregional, local, and foreign, long distance. They had the African rice popping. They had the Nile perch and the catfish. Like, you know, niggas had fish fries. You know what I'm saying? Motherfucker probably banging too. 250 BCE fish fries. Like, yo. But nah, for real though, now we got that. And we gonna get back to West Africa and leave all that other foolishness. Leave all that other foolishness alone, man. It's ridiculous to go back and forth with people that can't comprehend what you even talking about. So we on our thing. We on our thing, and if you try, y'all want to come for this, and it's a problem with this, you have anything that you want to add to it, you have anything that you want to, disagree with, because, certain people are disagreeable. But you can step up. We here. But
you gonna get this work. You gonna get this work, nigga. I killed you. Hold up. You gonna get this work.
But you gonna get that work though. You know what I'm talking about? 250 BCE catfish fries, man. I think that deserves before I get out of here, that deserves a Don DeMarco.
Don DeMarco.
Hey, peace, y'all, man. I'm about to play y'all out with the same song I brought y'all in with, and I'm out of here. I'm about to go watch Snowfall.
I think oftentimes when people hear me and see me, they think that I'm a fool. They think that somehow or another I've lost my mind, that I'm not down with the in crowd. They've said that nobody would love me and that I'm an outcast. But let me say this here now. We can be clear about anything. Please let me be clear about this. And I pray that it's received and understood. I don't want to be one of you. I don't want to be one of you weak men, weak people.
For my brother,
I'd rather die, death is welcome, rather than to call myself you spineless black men.
Sahara, I ain't your traditional. Rapper smoking medicinal, stayed in detention. Life is all about principles, cynical ass niggas. Sorry that I offended you. I bring something different while niggas sounding identical. I'd rather drown in a swimming pool than to let you imbeciles stop me from topping my pinnacle. Try me blocked by the genitals. Trust me, it's not intentional. It's the difference between a gangster and a criminal. Cause real gangsters can't do Breakfast Club interviews. A lot of you niggas don't own a business suit. A slave for every pair of Michael Jordan tennis shoe. But anywho, got your bitch walking around like she winning pool with no bottoms on, just the top of her swimming suit. What you gon' say when the niggas gon' try to get at you? Them in what army, or you just talking in general? Cause in the end, we all gon' die like them Seminoles, nigga. These niggas weak. I'm fucking up, these niggas weak. These niggas weak.
men in America today. The destruction of the family, the loss of integrity. When as a young boy, black shot down every day for years without stopping, when I look at what we are as black people, I'd rather be dead than to continue to live against such
Y'all ain't trying to start a revolution. Y'all looking for a restitution. Niggas kill each other every day and ain't no evolution. My partner shot 100 niggas and it was never proven. We just labeled him a gangster and kept it moving. Let me give you the same outcome, separate shooting. A white man kill a black, we holler persecution. So instead of looting, it's time to find some better schooling. You can act like y'all don't understand when I'm elocuting. Did I stutter? I was never Reuben. Y'all ain't no Black Panthers. You wasn't there with Newton. You ain't Martin Martin. Try to better humans. Instead of all these rappers, we need some better students. It's time to rebuild the neighborhoods that we helped to ruin. And the NAACP, y'all need some help recruiting. Fuck a resolution. Let's get some retribution. I feel like Malcolm X when he left the movement. These niggas bleed. I'm fucking up. These niggas bleed. These niggas bleed. I'm fucking up. These niggas bleed. Yeah. Y'all know what it is, yeah, I said it, nigga. All you niggas laying up with these bitches with no condoms and shit. Having mistake babies and shit, leaving these women to motherfucking raise your kids by their motherfucking self. Yeah, my nigga, I said it. You don't like what's going on in the motherfucking America, leave this motherfucker. When they said we were free, my nigga, that mean we were free to go back where the fuck we came from, my nigga. Yeah, a whole motherfucking continent that belong to us, nigga. It's called Africa, motherfucker. What the fuck is y'all talking about? Y'all ain't trying to start no revolution. Y'all motherfuckers spent 10 bands on the motherfucking section in the motherfucking club. 10 bands to build a whole motherfucking neighborhood in Nigeria, nigga. Get the fuck out of here.